Hello and welcome. Today's project is all about the cycle of addiction. I'm sure this video will resonate with you because everyone is addicted to something. We live in a society, consumeristic society, where everything is out and projected onto us for the purpose of fulfilling a certain need and want and longing that we have. There's something that we need that we haven't yet attained that will make us feel fulfilled, but when we attain that thing, we are not fulfilled. There's still a sense of lacking, yearning, lack of purpose and meaning. And a lot of people, whether it to the extreme end, whether it's drug, alcohol, sex addiction, to the more subtle addictions, where it's phone addiction or Netflix addiction or relationship dependencies. These are all mountains for people, and whether it's a smaller addiction like a phone addiction, that's your mountain to climb, and as well as someone who's suffering from drug addiction, yes, that's their mountain to climb. So what is your mountain? And really in this video I want to address the beginning stages of recovery. For me, when I started to overcome my anxiety disorder, which meant that I reached rock bottom, and it was this realization that my parents, friends, all of these other substances, these dependencies around me, they weren't helping because I was seeking them for help. Anxiety sufferers, what's happening is they're trying to, especially health anxiety sufferers, they're trying to solve this problem, right? That's why they go to the doctors constantly. That's why they're Googling their symptoms. That's why they become obsessed over their certain ailments and feelings and sensation, is because inside there's this problem-solving mechanism of, okay, there is this problem here. I have to keep it at the forefront of my values so that I can solve it and move forward. It's a threat to my life. I need to solve it. And so for me, when things weren't getting solved, I realized that, okay, all of these things that I were dependent on, they're not working for me. And then I sought Google, and I Googled the sensations and symptoms I was feeling, and then people popped up who were suffering and suffered from anxiety and health anxiety specifically, and overcame it naturally. And this resonated with me because first thing, I related to them because they went through the same thing I went through, and the second thing is they overcame it, and so that this thing of hope popped up and rose out of the surface. So I hope that in this video you find, and I want to project to you that you find somebody who overcame the same thing you're currently battling and contending. This is really important, and that's where hope arises for many people, and that's where hope arose for me, was seeing somebody who overcame this thing that I thought I couldn't get out of. I kept hitting a wall everywhere I went, and then it was like this path emerged out of the thicket. And I was able to say, hey, I haven't gone down there yet, right? It's like the saying where, you're on this dirt road or in the mud, but if you look to the right of you, there's this clear path. It's right there. And many people who are suffering from addiction, who are suffering from a sense of lacking, pain, and who are suffering from anxiety, fail to see that there are other solutions because they're in this narrow domain. They're in this narrow perspective, and they have to look to the right of them. They have to start to step outside of what's familiar to them, and pain is what's familiar to them, to see, hey, there's this other way to live. Hey, look, I found someone online who overcame this, who went through the same thing. They're speaking my language, and then study that person. And so the definition of addiction is when you try to stop something you want to stop, that you need to stop, but you can't seem to stop, right? And so for me, when I started to go through my anxiety recovery, I I went from unawareness to awareness. And that's because I had to confront my patterns. I had to look in the mirror and see what I'm doing every day that's keeping me in an anxious state. And also having that role model helped me realize the patterns I was unconsciously running. So I was starting to become more awake to what I was doing, my patterns. And then because of that, my dependencies started to rise to the surface. Oh, I know I should stop being so dependent on my parents for reassurance, or my relationship for reassurance, or I should stop being dependent on porn or weed or food or work even. These things started to come up because I was becoming more conscious of my lifestyle. And that's a big eye-opening thing. It's like in The Lion King, when Simba, I always love to use these metaphors because these stories are so powerful and they're so true, right? Where, Simba looks up to the stars because he's in this really dark place. He's in this unknown place in his life. He doesn't know what to do. He's confused. He looks up to the stars and he says, I need help. I want help. And then the shaman, Rafiki, shows up. It's like the voice from your unconscious mind shows up when you ask yourself, what stupid things am I doing every day that I know I should stop doing, but I can't seem to stop doing? And it's like the truth comes up. So when I started to be more awake in my life, I was confronting more of the truth. And then once I found that role model who spoke my language and gave me that hope, I had to invest my time and my money, right? Because I wanted to overcome this anxiety, so I invested in a program, I invested in books, and I sacrificed a lot of my old behaviors to seek this new path, this new way of being. And that takes time. That requires you to spend more quality time with yourself, to spend more time looking up to people this may not be your dream job, but it comes about, and it's a sign that this needs to be dealt with. I was never seeking to be a coach, an anxiety coach in my life. But once I overcame this giant mountain, I realized that my passion lied in this, because I couldn't believe I was able to get out of the hole I was in. Now, let's go over the cycle of addiction. The first thing is that there's pain. The second thing is that you use an addictive agent. You use weed, any kind of drug, alcohol. You use a relationship for dependency. You use movies and video games to distract and soothe you, and for anesthesia, right? The temporary relief. You use some sort of thing to numb you. And the third thing in the cycle is that there's a temporary numbness, a distraction. The fourth thing is that you get the consequence. And then the fifth thing is that you get the shame and guilt, leading to low self-worth and then more pain. And then you want to boost that pain, or to boost that pleasure artificially to numb that pain, and then the cycle goes back to the beginning. So it's this constant loop people find themselves in. And when somebody stops using an addictive substance, so for me, if you don't know my story, I overcame porn addiction. That's one of the many addictions I overcame. And I'm 3 years, I think, more than 3 years now, free of porn addiction. And I realize, looking back, that whenever I tried to stop porn, what happened was the seesaw of the dopamine in my brain was tilting. Whenever I stopped watching porn, what happened was the pleasure started to go down, and then the pain started to go back up. And then once the pain started to go back up, I needed to watch porn again so that I could numb that pain and boost my mood and emotions artificially by the stimuli. And so that's where it seemed to me that I was stuck and that there was no way out. But through constant breaking of going periods of time without it, I started to realize and become aware that there is a way out of this. Even though I relapse periodically, I know that I could go periods of time without it. And that's a really important thing, because some of my clients who I talk about with nofap and porn addiction is that they spend 18 years watching porn, 20 years, more than that. And then they stop for a week, and then they relapse, and then they're really hard on themselves. But then I say to them, well, you went a week without it. That's a huge accomplishment. You went 2 days without that thing that you were dependent on for 20 years. And so it's from that week alone, you've already seen in yourself a massive paradigm shift. Hey, I could go a week without this thing. The first step in recovery is admitting to yourself that there is a problem, that you have this thing that you are unable to control and that you want to stop, but you just can't seem to. Now, this for me was when I realized from online, when I'm referring to my porn addiction, where I saw people online who overcame this, and I saw that there is another way of living. Because when I was dependent on this thing to make me feel good all the time, I only saw that thing. I only saw this way of living. But online, these men were stopping porn and talking about it, saying how much it changed their social anxiety, how much energy they now have, how they are no longer very sensitive to sexual cues anymore, but more in tune to their partners and more sensitive to their partner's touch. And this resonated with me because I saw it in their eyes that they were more in control, and they were exuding this calmness and freedom that I was unconsciously yearning. And because I was using porn for that transcendent experience, I saw that you can be transcendent without that thing in other ways, in just going to the gym instead of watching it, or meditating instead of watching it. Their lifestyle became more rich because of how they expressed it, and that opened my eyes to another world. And like Wim Hof says, feeling is understanding. So you have to go through that withdrawal period without that certain thing to finally see the benefits. Because once you start to subtract that thing you were so reliant upon, you're going to feel a certain frustration. And this frustration is only a temporary thing, because your brain is starting to adjust to the new rhythm that you've introduced into your life. And so now that a week has gone by, 2 weeks have gone by, your dopamine system starts to regulate and go back to this homeostasis state. You finally start to see and feel that life is better. And it's important that you acknowledge that. And that's where I'm going to leave you on today's video. Thank you so much for being here with me. Please rate and review this episode, this video below. Let me know what you're battling. What have you overcame in your life? What's the mountain you climbed? And lastly, do not let anxiety define who you are. I will see you on the next video. Bye for now. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and that bell so that whenever a new video of mine appears, you will be one of the first to know. Namaste.